On this edition of the OFN Today, we'll recap last night's Monday Night Football action and what it might mean for all four teams. Then we talk fantasy football with the managing director for RotoExperts.com, Scott Engel, as Scott gives us his top 10 ads of the week. As the OFN Today for this Tuesday, September 11th, 2018, on the Ourlads Football Radio Network starts now. All right, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Today as we talk Tuesday morning football and fantasy football every Tuesday through the season. We've got 4 teams and 2 games this Tuesday morning from last night, but that'll be the only Monday night of the season with 2 games. And, I'm not so sure how I feel about that. I think I'd rather have 2 Monday night football games than a Thursday game. I don't know. It just seems that the Thursday games don't go over very well, and I know the players don't like it, and I wouldn't mind skipping that. But you know what I prefer? I prefer a college football, like a big college football game on Thursday. I'd rather have that. Do 2 Monday Night Football games in the NFL. It gives the players extra rest. I'm sure they'd appreciate that. And look, this is NFL and college football. They don't work together. But for college football, that's the one thing I don't like about college football weekday games is you never get big games. You always get decent games, but you really never get like one of the top 6 games. I mean, it's so aggravating in college. Some weeks you go into the Saturday 3:30 games, and there'll be like 6 games on that you want to watch. 12 o'clock, maybe there's a game. 8 o'clock, yeah, okay, maybe there's 2 or 3 games, but to tell you the truth, I don't even want to have to watch 2 or 3 games on Saturday night either. I'd rather have 1 big game on Thursday night, 1 big game, maybe 2. 2's not bad on Saturday night, just in case, for whatever reason. You always have that opposite game. And wouldn't be a bad idea to have a big Thursday night game and then like a Boston College Wake Forest as like that second game. And then on Saturday, you have a couple of big games at 12, and then you have, and by doing all that, you've now put it to where maybe there's 3 or 4 max games you want to watch on Saturday at 3:30. Just too many. I mean, really, do we have to have it all jammed into Saturday at 3:30? The OFN Today is brought to you by Ourlads.com with the best pro and college football depth charts on the net. PrimeSportsNetwork.com, the sleeper sports site of the industry, where we debate, handicap, and inform with the very best. And for great in-depth fantasy analysis and insights from Scott Engel and his team, visit RotoExperts.com, and you'll receive the exclusive Edge in-season fantasy football package. At checkout, just enter the promo code THEKING for your special discount and join the live 24/7 expert chat room. All right, what a night last night, especially if you're a Jet fan. And if you are a Jet fan, then I would suggest you tune in to the postgame show last night because I had an opportunity to go over the game. I don't know what it was. Probably about 45 minutes after the game. No, maybe a half hour. A little bit sooner than that. And it was quite a night. If you're a Jet fan, quite a night. That's all I can say. And I mentioned it yesterday, and I'll mention it again as often as possible this week because it's how I felt. It was the biggest Jet win since 2010. Jets over Patriots at New England in the postseason on their way to their second straight AFC Championship game. In my mind, for me, everybody's got favorite. This and not just a favorite, but just what I really believe for the organization, for where they are, for where they were, and with Sam Darnold, the hopeful franchise quarterback, youngest start ever for a quarterback, NFL, whatever, blah blah blah. Fact is, I think all of that, including with the Jets being able to pick off passes and score touchdowns on defense and kick return touchdowns on defense, and we'll definitely talk about whether or not the Jets would be a good pickup this week in fantasy with Scott. But you just couldn't have asked. Seriously. There's no way you could have dreamt up. No way. As a Jet fan, you could have dreamt up a better game than that one. Truly a classic opener for Jet fans and the organization. And I've said it before on the Jet Show. If you're just a national fan, you don't really listen to that. You're not a Jet fan. I have been very positive and acceptance of everything, including extending Bowles and McCagnon and what they have done since the end of last season. And even before last season, when we talked about them being a better team than the national media was giving them credit for. They proved it on the field last year. And look, are they perfect? Of course not. Have they made mistakes? Of course they have, even in this last offseason. But you know what? So do a lot of other coaches and GMs. And I just think that in all, I think they've done a very good job. I was very optimistic about where they're going. I did not predict them to make the playoffs this year. I'm still not predicting them at this point. It's just I think it's much tougher in the AFC. And for Jet fans, they got to be real happy that the Raiders didn't win last night because that would have made it even tougher. I mean, the John Gruden, black hole, Monday Night Football. It's great. I mean, if you think about this, I know the NFL has gone through a lot of stuff over in the offseason, the last couple of seasons, dating back, whether concussions, Kaepernick, whatever. It's been ridiculous. It's just we just want to watch football, okay? Us diehard fans, and yet you start this weekend, and I think it couldn't have gone any better. Really, except if the Raiders had won. If the Raiders had won last night, boy, would that have made this weekend a marketing dream for the league. To have had Aaron Rodgers come this close, it looked like, to being knocked out for the year. You know what a damage that would have done with the Packer primetime games. So all of that is going to, and just in general, even on Sundays, it would have killed the Packer area as far as marketing and the league in general to have Aaron Rodgers on the shelf. And then he turns around and has a classic game, a classic ending. Just, again, if you're not a Bear fan or even if you're not a Packer fan, it's what you want to see if you're a fan. Then you go to last night and you get the New York franchise that, and look, we don't even know where the Giants stand at this point because the Giants, even though they were at home, they played a tougher team than the Jets, and they didn't get blown out. So I don't think the Giants have anything to be ashamed about. You know, it's a bad matchup anyway, and they almost won. It's a bad matchup because their offensive line is the weakness of their football team. Even though they went out and got Solder and drafted Hernandez, it's still the weakness and the big question of their football team. And yet, they were in the game till the end against a team that nearly won the AFC Championship. So I think that's, and this is why we talk about it all the time, it's too early. Week 1, week 2, even week 3. And sometimes, you know, we'll go through this during the season, not even sometimes, I mean, we always do, and we go, in week 7, you know what, it's kind of too early. So there's levels of how early it is to judge teams, but definitely week 1 is way too early, and even 2 and 3 based on matchups. Okay, because it's just not fair. Because you don't know. It's and of course it's a bigger extreme in college. You know, playing if you're a big Power 5 school, you play Alabama A&M one week, and then you get and then you move out to play Rice. And you blow out those two teams, and now next on the schedule, you got to take on, Michigan State. And what do you think? Of course, those two blowouts mean nothing. They're meaningless. So it's the same thing with the NFL. You don't know, or the exact opposite. You know, you got to play those tough teams early, and just like the Giants did. So, look, if the Giants can't beat the Cowboys this week, based on what I saw from the Cowboys and really from both teams, then they've got problems because based on what I saw, based on what we felt about both teams coming into the regular season, the Giants should win that football game. So if they don't win that football game, then there's going to be a lot of it, especially in the New York market. And by the way, if they don't win that football game and the Jets beat the Dolphins, even worse for the Giants. But anyway, getting back, the New York market. So, the Giants gave an effort. Jets with a tremendous win with their hopeful franchise savior at quarterback. And that's huge for them. And then for the league, anytime you have New York involved, you go out west now. Anytime you have L.A. involved, so you've got the Rams. They're going to be strong again. That's a good thing. But the Raiders nearly made it a trifecta if they would have won that football game. And what blew it for them was Derek Carr's end zone interception in the second quarter. That was that you cannot do. When you're a dog in that situation, under just everything involved as far as, first game for Gruden, new scheme. This is, what was it? I think they showed last night every new coach lost this week. Okay. I know that doesn't always happen. Sometimes new coaches get off to good starts. And it's just, it is what it is. But when they lose, and you see how some, not Gruden, but maybe Patricia, because remember, we talked to Jeremy Reisman from Pride of Detroit at SB Nation, and he warned us, and so the listeners were warned that Detroit would more than likely get off to a slow start, which is the reason why I thought when I did the shows last week, talked with Mark. I don't know if it was Mark Lawrence on Wednesday, Teddy Savransky on Thursday, or Dave Koken on Friday. Talked about how I thought the Jets were a pretty decent pick, moneyline play, and they went up to 3-1 last night before kickoff because Detroit was gonna get off to a slow start. Different staff, even though they kept Jim Bob Cooter at offensive coordinator, but still head coach, new, first time, all of that didn't look good in the preseason. So for the Raiders, still, even though it's Gruden, it's new staff, new schemes, they're learning. And say what you want about the Rams and the Raiders, neither team. See, they'll excuse the Rams for not playing together the whole preseason, but the Raiders didn't really play a lot of their guys either. Yet they got up to a better start. And that's why the difference of the game was Derek Carr's interceptions, especially the one in the end zone. Forget the pick six at the end of the game. The meaningful one was the second quarter in the end zone. You cannot do that. Carr has done that before. The one thing about Carr that at this point in time in his maturation that holds him back from getting to possibly become an elite quarterback in the NFL. I don't think he's ever going to be that. I said that when he was drafted. I always kind of compared him in a way as far as where his trajectory could go, as far as it could go, to Dan Fouts. I said, I could see Derek Carr having a Dan Fouts type career. A guy that's going to throw the ball a lot. He's going to put up a lot of yardage. He's going to throw a lot of touchdowns. But I also felt that, he'll make his share of mistakes. And I just don't know, excuse me for having the volume up on that one, but just don't know about whether he could turn into a quarterback, and maybe now that he's got Gruden, that can limit those types of mistakes. And I think more importantly, what needs to be done if he's going to become close to an elite quarterback, because he's never going to be, in my mind. And Gruden's never had a quarterback this talented like Derek Carr, but I think what it's going to happen is, in order for him to take that next step, the Raiders got to have a running game at some point. Now, look, again, first matchup, I'm not going to judge the Raiders on Lynch carrying the ball, rushing for 41 yards. That's just unfair because the Rams are going to be one of the best defenses in football. So I'm not going to judge that and say, well, the Raiders, if they're only going to get 40 yards a week from Lynch, the 40, the way he was running last night, the 40 against the Rams is probably going to be more like 80 to 100 every week. And we kind of felt that Lynch was going to have a better year this year after being out of football a couple years ago and making it back last year. He was going to have rust. Okay, but he looked much sharper last night. And I don't think that's going to change. Now, you probably want to give him a little rest here and there because of his brutal way of playing and running and all that, but the Raiders will. They got a couple of decent backups. Richard and Washington, especially Richard. He's got some game-breaking ability in him. But Carr's interceptions, we've seen them before. We saw it again in the second quarter. That killed them. I know it didn't kill them at the time because they were still leading the game. They were still in it. But that really killed him. It came back to haunt them. And to forget about that lob, who knows what that was. That was just him I guess it was him thinking that he threw the ball farther than he did out of bounds. And he just, it was sort of like watching, if you watched golf on Monday, Justin Rose on his shot on 18, when all he needed was a par to win the BMW championship right down the fairway. And he chucks it. And it basically lands like 5 feet from the green. That's what Derek Carr did. He threw the ball, thought it was going to go out of bounds. It didn't. And that's what Carr's done. But the bigger one was the end zone interception. He's done that before. He's got to stop it. But more importantly, as I said, run the ball more effectively. Don't rely on Derek Carr as much. Because if you do that, plays like that are going to happen. And I think that in all, they passed the test. I think the Raiders passed the test. With flying colors, I wouldn't say that. They didn't win, but they passed the test. They played a very good football team, and I think they looked even better than most people thought. We talked about that with Jeff Smith from Heavy.com, that they've got players on this football team. Don't think the Raiders are going to be a pathetic team because they're not. Gruden was getting ripped all over the place, especially with the Khalil Mack situation, for me, unfairly. You want to rip him a little bit, I got no problem with that, but jealousy, the media, going to rip the guy, whatever. Gruden is an excellent coach. I don't care what anybody says. Fans love him. Most fans love him. And he's going to do a good job there. So I think the Raiders still lost. Don't worry about the score. They're going to be fine. I think they're going to be probably by December. I still think they're going to be in the playoff race. I think that's what kind of talent they have. Obviously, the Jets, my prediction before the season began, they'll be in the playoff race in December. I obviously still believe that now after last night's game. Detroit's in a lot of trouble because the Bears are better, Vikings, Packers. So you might be looking at a last-place team, especially if they do get off to a slow start, which we talked about last week and sure looked like it after last night. And the Rams looked like the Rams after the first half, so they're going to be just fine as they will run away with the NFC West. All right, let's talk fantasy football. So, by the way, next year, trust me, because we had 32 NFL training camp preview shows. We had all about 30, 45 minutes each. We had 10 college conference previews, Notre Dame, a bunch of other type of shows. I mean, contributors ranging from, 50 to 60. We had so much more programming and contributors over the past, 45 days that at least we were able to set up this I guess you can call it a little bit of marketing partnership with RotoExperts.com before the season began. It was a little late. And that's why next year, trust me, we have so many other great things that we're going to bring to the table, especially having shows way in advance of the season to get you guys ready for next year's draft and so on. But, hey, you know what? Not too late because we're here, beginning of the season, first week to dive into waiver pickups. And that is why we want to have our special guest and fantasy analyst on here every Tuesday. And by the way, if you have any questions or comments for Scott, he'll be happy to answer for you next Tuesday. You can email us here at fantasy@primesportsnetwork.com or send us a message through our Twitter account @PrimeSN, as in Sports Network. So again, fantasy@primesportsnetwork.com. Scott will answer, or maybe he won't, but I think he will. Scott, thanks for joining us this season to talk fantasy football.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be on here. And, interesting first week. The waiver wire is going to open tonight, tomorrow night in some leagues. I don't think there are any big difference makers there, but there are certainly some hole pluggers.
Yeah, I wrote down some before you sent me the list, and I'll get into my players after I go over your list. We've got 10 waiver ad pickups, top 10, that we want to go over every week. And we're going to start with the wide receivers first. And actually, all 4 of your receivers were on my list, so I was happy about that. Let's start with Brandon Marshall. You cover Seattle. We talked to you when we previewed the NFC West a couple of weeks ago. And, of course, Seattle, you covered them for Roto Experts, fantasy, obviously, angle. But still, you're a longtime Seattle Seahawk fan. Brandon Marshall looked like, after just one game, especially with Baldwin going down, that, I don't know, could he actually be Russell Wilson's number one target for now?
Yeah, I think so. He proved in camp, I think, that he wasn't done. When he had that leaping catch over Xavier Rhodes in the third preseason game, I said to myself, wow, this guy looks really healthy. Maybe he's not 100% of what he used to be, but he can still be very effective. And Russell Wilson loves throwing that 50-50 ball,
yeah,
especially to a tall receiver. He's had other receivers that he threw the 50-50 ball, like, to Richardson, Baldwin. They all know how to go up and get it, but this guy is perfect for that. And also, he takes over as a red zone target. So I think, Russell Wilson, there are two kind of quarterbacks in football, and I think you know this. One that you put a supporting cast around them to, make them better, but there are others like Russell Wilson, who's one of the best in the game, that no matter who you put around them, they'll make them relevant. And I think he's going to do that with Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, I think when some people might say, yeah, it's 1 week, matchups, like the Raiders yesterday. All right, they took Cooper out, they took Nelson out, so they went to Cook, and we'll get to Cook in a little bit. But for this situation, I think it is different because with Jerron Brown, who had a really good preseason, he's never had a big year in his career. So you're just going on numbers and trying to compute Arizona, breakout year for that player. Well, big preseason, I guess maybe. But here you got Brandon Marshall, who's a proven commodity, and even though he hasn't had a good season for a couple of years, since his last season with the Jets, or maybe even his second to last season with the Jets, the fact is when you have Russell Wilson throwing the football to you and you have Baldwin out, because that's a big deal too, right? Because you're picking up Brandon Marshall hoping Baldwin's not in the lineup each week, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we never hope for anybody to get injured, but the word on him is he has a torn MCL, and he's got problems in both knees, so he could be out at least 4 weeks, which is unusual. We've never seen Baldwin miss any games in his career. But I wouldn't forget about Jerron Brown because, he would always get open in Arizona, and they didn't have the type of quarterbacks that they have with Russell Wilson, who's a great deep thrower. And Tyler Lockett is no lock to stay healthy, is what we've seen before.
Yeah, and if I'm Seattle, I think he's so important in the return game that I just wouldn't really mess with. I know he's been more productive as a receiver, and that might still be his number one job. But, yeah, if you have Jerron Brown there now and Brandon Marshall and you do get Baldwin back, then I think Lockett almost becomes sort of like Paul Richardson in a way. Before, of course, he moved on to Washington. Let's talk about another receiver who is intriguing because he's on the Patriots, so you got Tom Brady to throw the football to you. So that, of course, is pretty big. But also, here's a guy that was highly, he was a top draft pick, a high draft pick for the Colts, and things just didn't work out for him for whatever reason. And it just kind of looked like, okay, here's a guy that's going to be, I don't know if you want to call him a bust or he's just going to be a journeyman. But when you land on the Patriots with Tom Brady, then all of a sudden you got a shot. And now with all the, with the receivers gone and Cooks is out, in L.A., and Amendola's gone, and Edelman's out for a little while as he's suspended. You looked at that receiver core for the Patriots, and you're like, well, okay, Chris Hogan's number one. Well, okay, besides Gronk, is there anybody else that could possibly step up and take advantage? And after the preseason he had and the first week, Philip Dorsett could be very interesting, right?
Yeah, 7 catches for 66 yards in week 1. Working on a lot of out patterns against that Houston secondary. Certainly worth the pickup while Edelman is out, but you have to be cautious about picking up and using him right away because he's got Jacksonville in week 2. But then you can roll him out there against Miami in week 3. But this is the type of receiver you're looking at for depth. You're probably not until the bye week start. So how much you're really going to use Philip Dorsett at all? It's not like he's going to crack your starting lineup in a major way unless you've lost to Doug Baldwin or if Marquise Goodwin doesn't play. So that's what's going on with a lot of the waiver guys that are out there this week. A lot of them are pluggers until we get to the tight end where you might have to plug them in your starting lineup right away. But some of these wide receivers are more depth selections. Now, in one of my leagues, ahead of time, I picked up Marshall in 2 leagues, and I have Baldwin in those leagues, so I'm probably going to have to pop him in the starting lineup. I don't have a choice, but
sure.
I think Philip Dorsett is more of a luxury than a necessity.
All right, let's now go to the next receiver who made a big play on Sunday Night Football. And I remember talking about Geronimo Allison when he came out in the draft a couple of years ago, that this is a guy that was a nice sleeper. He was somebody that had an opportunity to watch him in the East-West game, had a big East-West game, and he's got good size. And he just seemed like a player that, especially once he was drafted by the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, okay, we'll keep an eye on him. And I know that when we did some of our preview shows regarding the Packers and the division, we talked about, do the Packers, with Nelson gone, do the Packers have somebody else to step up, like a true number 3 receiver? And what, if anything, happens to one of their top 2 in Adams or Cobb? Do they have a guy that they could really turn to? Well, you know what? I think they do now in Allison.
Yeah, and, we've seen sometimes the number 3 receiver be very relevant in Green Bay before. And I was recommending Allison in the preseason, a late draft pick, because Randall Cobb often doesn't stay healthy. He's often been an injury risk, so he could step into that number 2 receiver role for Green Bay at any time. The thing that we still haven't, found out fully about Aaron Rodgers as we record this, but if DeShone Kizer gets in there, obviously the production is much more capped.
Oh, there ain't no question about that. That turnover machine, DeShone Kizer. Actually, that's a good situation. Did you ever do that, by the way? Do you ever say, hey, you know what? If I'm the type of person who likes to, especially if you do weekly fantasy leagues, and you're deciding from week to week on a defense, don't you sometimes say, well, I'm not gonna necessarily go with a great defense that week against a bad offense, but hey, if I can find a defense to go up against DeShone Kizer, who's a turnover machine, and maybe that's the way to go.
Oh yeah, certainly. You want to. We'll know who the bad quarterbacks are soon enough. Although there's nobody starting that really strikes me as a Kizer type this year. Hopefully we don't see too many injuries, but I think that you got to start your defenses against the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, well, at this point in time, that's the truth, especially if Peterman gets a start again, which I can't even believe that is a decision. But anyway, and speaking of keeping quarterbacks healthy, last night when I forget the time of the game, but you had the penalty, the roughing the passer on Carr, and he got hit really low. And then you got Booger McFarland trying to make excuses and what is the guy supposed to do? Those are very dangerous. We have constantly seen quarterbacks end their season on plays like that, and that is actually when I am perfectly happy to see the officials call roughing the passer. You have got to eliminate those types of tackles. We have got to have players like Derek Carr in the league and all these other top quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers. It's just not fun when DeShone Kizer, or whoever the backup quarterback is now for the Raiders has to play all season long.
It's kind of dicey, when I talk about that, because, as much as I analyze a game and, I'm very confident in the way I analyze it, I haven't played the game, and I've spoken to guys that play the game, and last year when Devontae Adams took that crunching hit from Chicago, I did some player interviews. I've had the pleasure of being very friendly with Hall of Famer Chris Dolman, who's done a lot of work with us in the past, and I asked him about it, and I don't think these guys, from what you hear from players like Chris Dolman, et cetera, Keith Bullock, who also spoke out about it on Twitter, and even Richard Sherman, that these guys are necessarily going out there with the intent to hurt each other despite all these rules. It's just, when you launch yourself in a certain way, you make a tackle in a certain way, there's no way you can really stop and say, well, I can't do this because I don't want to hurt the guy. So I refrain from really speculating on those things because, as much as I've watched the game and I've had an Ivory game, I've never been in the trenches or worn the professional uniform to know what it's like to be in that situation. Only the players know, what the intent is. I don't think they want to hurt anybody else, although sometimes, there have been guys in the NFL that just want to lay somebody out and they don't care. Yeah. They have the Jack Tatum type mentality, but a lot of those guys don't. And when I was speaking to Chris Dolman about that, he said, look, when you launch yourself at a certain angle, it's not like you can stop yourself midair.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no question it happens. Whether or not it's I want to hurt the quarterback to hurt his career or get him out for the season, that's one thing, as opposed to, hey, we got to rough this guy up, and we got to do everything we can to rough him up. And if that means we knock him out of the game to win the game, then that's what we do. That happens sometimes. I mean, there ain't no question about that. But, yeah, the whole thing about we're trying to injure the guy on purpose and ruin his career, I think we haven't seen that in a long time, especially you would think that these players are smart enough to understand that with guys like Aaron Rodgers out there playing football, it's better for everybody's bottom line financially. Let's conclude your wide receiver list with Quincy Enunwa, who made it back from his own injury last season, out all year. And so they were definitely cautious with him, and sure looks like he is 100% healthy. He's a very physical receiver, so that's another reason why I'm sure they wanted to be extra cautious, keeping him out all season. And he sure had a great start. We didn't know who was going to be Sam Darnold's go-to guy, but it sure looks like Enunwa was going to be the go-to guy. Now, who knows what happens when Kurse does play, because he's the same similar type of possession, player, smart player, catches and things of that nature. And Robbie Anderson, to me, is and I've said this many times before, to me, he's Alvin Harper. That's what, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a one-trick pony. You throw the bomb, and I'm going to catch the bomb.
Tampa Bay Alvin Harper? Because that would be bad.
No, not the Tampa Bay, the Dallas Alvin Harper. So, big start for Enunwa, and I could easily see him being a very interesting pickup, especially when he could wind up being Darnold's number one receiver.
Yeah, 6 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown in the season opener. And Sam Darnold does a nice job of taking what the defense gives him and knows how to throw to the stick, so rely on a lot of key downs. So I think he could be a good PPR wide receiver 3. It's like 12 to 18 points per week, depending on where he scores a touchdown or not. I think he's going to have a nice floor. As for Robbie Anderson, I don't think he's quite Alvin Harper. I think when the matchups are not as tough as they were last night, that, if he could roll up more catches, I like him as a high upside fantasy wide receiver 3, and as Darnold continues to improve, he's got a big play guy there.
All right, let's turn now over to running backs, and you've got 4 here. Let's start with Phillip Lindsay. The one running back that I had on my list, you have on yours. He was a player that defied the odds as a rookie free agent. You always get these guys that make NFL teams, and it's one thing to make an NFL team in that situation. It's another thing to actually contribute. And Lindsay looks like he is going to contribute an awful lot. They're going to give him touches. He's got game-breaking ability. And it's also a nice story that he's a local kid from Colorado, of course, playing with the Buffaloes last season.
Yeah, and, wearing Terrell Davis's number, asking him permission. Seems like he's pretty much sewn into a complimentary role. Kind of reminds me of maybe a Tariq Cohen, Darren Sproles type,
yes.
Who will get some carries here and some catches here, but those types tend to be inconsistent yet explosive in fantasy, and it's hard to predict. Like if you're playing on FanDuel or DraftKings in any good given week, it's good upside. But if you want to roll the dice, you want to be aggressive, you use these guys. They're going to have some very nice weeks. They're going to have some nice weeks when they're quiet. He's 5'8", 190, so he's not cut out for a big workload, but it seems like he's going to have a role.
All right, Buck Allen. Now, Buck Allen, is he like your typical, all right, if you're in a PPR league, Buck Allen is definitely going to be there for you, especially if there's an injury situation with Alex Collins. But if you're not, then I don't know about that because his main trait is he is one of the better receiving running backs in the NFL. And now the Ravens look like offensively they're going to be a lot more explosive this season than they have been in recent years.
The problem with Alex Collins is, as talented as he will dart to a quick roll, put his foot in the ground, and, is very aggressive for his size and, good speed, etc. Fumbling problems have plagued him since he came to the league, and that's why he got cut by the Seahawks and didn't make it out as, off the depth chart early in the year last year. And then he fumbled this past week and only 7 carries for 13 yards. he got benched for a while. If he's going to continue to have a recurrence of those issues, which he puts behind him for a long stretch, he's going to start losing touches to Buck Allen, and they'll start using Buck Allen near the goal line as well. So if you have Alex Collins, you got to have Buck Allen.
And what about Kenneth Dixon? I know Dixon is, and it again this week. It seems like every time Kenneth Dixon plays, the very next week, there's some sort of injury or suspension issue, and so the guy just is not a very consistent player week in and week out. But you do get the feeling that if anything did happen to Alex Collins, I could see Dixon still being maybe the number one guy, Allen maintaining his role, but then also, like you said, getting the touchdown carries and such. But Dixon's a guy, if he could ever stay healthy and out of trouble and anything happens to Collins, then he's intriguing if he's available.
The problem with Dixon, though, is that, we saw some reps from him last week, but, then he got injured again. So,
That's right.
That's why he's not in the conversation. He hurt his knee again, and he's according to the Ravens, he's, quote, expected to miss some time.
Yep.
End quote.
Yep. Better be patient with him. By the way, before we leave the Ravens, and I know you don't have a quarterback on your waiver ads, but what about Flacco as a backup?
In a 2-quarterback league, might be on the waiver wire. I also like Darnold as a pickup, because I think he's going to be solid and sometimes statistically outstanding.
All right, let's finish up the running backs. T.J. Yeldon. Now, I've said this for the past couple of years with the Jags' backup running back situation since they've acquired Fournette, that I was surprised they didn't go after. Look, last year they went after Ivory in free agency, and I said, okay, that's okay. I still thought maybe they should go after another draft pick. But then again, as the season went last year, Yeldon looked like he was in a better role as a backup, and even Corey Grant, when he got touches, was productive. But still, in this past draft, I was like, I still think the Jags should go after a power runner, someone similar to Fournette. You can get those guys in the 5th or 6th round because you just can't trust Fournette. He gets banged up, injured. He's another guy with character issues. But what I was thinking about Yeldon is maybe it's just not the role he's in now. Maybe he's just on a better team, and he's also got more confidence. He's a veteran as opposed to when he was a top 2nd-round draft pick and so much was expected. He was thrown in as a starter. So he does become a very intriguing player, especially if anything does happen long-term to Fournette.
Yeah, and with Fournette, the injury issues have dated back to college.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've continued to see them again and again. That's why I listed him as a preseason sleeper. Explosive runner, more versatile than Fournette, but not as talented as Fournette. But even if you don't own Fournette, I think you need to go out and make a fab claim on this guy because you just can't trust Fournette to stay healthy.
All right, and you mentioned Nyheim Hines. Now, Marlon Mack is the number one rusher. But with Mack not playing, look, anytime you got to bring in guys that, the Colts, I know the rookie played Wilkins, and he's not a number one back. But Mack, he'll return at some point. We just don't know when. But Hines is a very fast player. They want to get the ball in his hands. Luck already looks like he's ahead of schedule. So you kind of think Hines is an interesting pickup.
I do, because, they can't trust Marlon Mack as a regular ball carrier. And maybe this even becomes like a Theo Riddick sort of situation from a few years ago where they're throwing to Hines in the flat area as an extension of the run very often. And Andrew Luck's never had a receiving back like this either. He only got 7 catches for 33 yards, but I think 7 catches is significant. Put it together with 33 yards, you're talking 10 PPR points right there. And I think, as a former college wide receiver, that, this guy has more statistical upside. So, when we talk about guys like Phillip Lindsay, et cetera, Tariq Cohen, Nyheim Hines is another guy in this mold.
All right, and now the last position, we've got a couple of tight ends. Jonnu Smith is definitely going to be somebody that you want to keep an eye on with Delaney Walker going out for the year. Big blow for Tennessee. Of course, Marcus Mariota can never stay healthy either, so that's something that could impact whether or not you want any Titans except for maybe a couple of running backs, and that might not even be a good idea if Mariota ain't around. But Mariota's all right, and I'm sure he'll be the typical Mariota. Maybe he'll miss a few games this season. But Smith is somebody that was eventually going to replace Walker. He's not as talented as Walker, but still, Walker was such a big part of the offense that you got to think that some of those targets are going to come his way.
Well, he's not as seasoned as Walker. The kid's very talented from all accounts. Did catch 2 touchdown passes in his first 3 games last year, and you have to figure that, working with Delaney Walker, he's probably learned a lot of the fundamentals of the game. So, look, a second-year tight end's always a roll of the dice, but an opportunity doesn't always lead to production. But I think you have to take a shot here if you lost to Delaney Walker. Even if Matt Castle's in there, he might want to go to the tight end.
And the other tight end is Ian Thomas. And it's interesting. I believe, what is he, the second rookie you have on your list? No, third. You've got Lindsey, you've got Hines, and now you got Thomas. And I think Thomas was drafted to take over for Olsen. Olsen's on his last legs, and it's he gets hurt again. So, and I do think that, Cam Newton and the offense and Norv Turner, they're going to want to get the ball to the tight end a little bit. So he, just like Smith, could be somebody to pick up. What is the latest on Olsen?
Yeah, with Olsen, it's speculation it's a serious foot injury. Ian Thomas was actually drafted in the 4th round, but some scouting reports saying, when maybe one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the entire class, but they felt like it was more of a project. Did show a little bit in the preseason, and rookie tight ends are definitely a gamble, but why not pick him up and see if he can become involved here? And if he doesn't, you can always cut him in a week or 2.
All right, now three on my list that I want to ask you about. Jared Cook, speaking of tight ends, I have really criticized Cook over the years. Got the big contract with the Rams, drops all over the place, complete underachiever, goes to the Raiders. All right, he improved last year, started a little bit of an improvement last year, but wow, did he finally live up to his expectations, even though it was just one game, but I've never seen him play like that, ever.
No, it was a very interesting matchup designed by the Raiders. But, the thing is with Cook is that we've seen 9 years of a lot of inconsistency, unmet expectations. So, don't overbid on this guy if you use Fab. If you don't need him, don't use your first waiver priority on him, because it could be 9 catches for 180 yards, and then next week it could be 1 catch for 9 yards. So I think you have to temper your expectations with him. The talent has always been there, but we've been teased like this before.
All right, and then I also wanted to ask you with the situation with Goodwin, the number 1 receiver with the Niners, Garoppolo sure went a lot to Dante Pettis, and he's got a lot of speed, game breaker, kick return, all-timer in college at Washington. Another rookie, but this all depends on Goodwin.
Yeah, but the one good play that Garoppolo made was to Pettis. Broke the pocket, turned his back, and then Pettis did a nice job of keeping his feet in. If Goodwin is missing any significant time, but they're saying that he's day-to-day, Pettis could be a factor. But also, you're not seeing a lot from Pierre Garçon, so Pettis is worth the flyer. And
then lastly, the breakout defense special teams team was definitely the Jets last night. It's one game. I do think that they're going to be a better turnover team this year. Bowles has the personnel he's looking for. So it's not going to be like that, of course, every week. But I think it's a glimpse of what we could see. Throwing on Andre Roberts. They haven't had a true kick returner like that in years. And why not pick up the Jets on defense?
Yeah, why not, give that a crack? They play Miami next week in their home opener. So they should be good. The secondary was very aggressive. Jamal Adams is obviously, a striker all over the field. And the defensive line played very well. We had some no-one-named linebackers play very well. And they seemed like they were very well coached up last night. So I think with a defense like that, you take it week to week. After 4 weeks, if they're still playing like this, then we know we have a defense that we can start every week rather than stream. But take it 1 week at a time. You don't spend a lot of money on a defense or use a high waiver priority, but I like the Jets this week.
All right, Scott, before I let you go, talk a little bit about the exclusive Edge in-season fantasy football package, which I used at the beginning of the show to promote, and we'll be talking about it every week as well. But tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We have everything from, the whatever you need, including my lineup rankings, waiver columns today, in-depth statistical breakdowns, and great feature is our live Slack chat channel, where at any time during the day you can ask questions to experts, and it's specifically very useful on game day. So check it out. Enter the King at checkout for a special discount, because that is my nickname in the fantasy industry.
All right, the King, is it?
Yeah. Yes.
Pretty modest of you. That's not bad. Did you create the name yourself, or did somebody give it to you?
You cannot give nicknames to yourself.
Okay, I like that. That's
my original producer on satellite radio gave it to me.
That's awesome. Great, yeah. Scott. Well, I'm glad to have the King here. If I'm going to have a fantasy expert, I want somebody that has the King as his moniker. So I think that's pretty awesome. Scott, hopefully next week we'll be checking on our email account every week and the message boards on Twitter for anybody that wants to ask any questions. And if we have any, I'll shoot them your way. We'll talk about it on the air, and we'll get your 10 pickups again for next week. So thanks a lot for joining us. Enjoy the week preparing for week 2.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Scott. All right. That is Scott Engel with rotoexperts.com. Once again, to email us, you're going to send that email to fantasy@primesportsnetwork.com. Now, you might be saying, which especially with the email, with the Twitter @PrimeSN, what is that all about? This is the Our Football Network. But again, I run primesportsnetwork.com. It's been around for a while, over 10 years actually. And it's been a process, trust me. I mean, it came out of the radio industry for about 20 years and got into the internet industry a little bit over my head, learning on the job. And it took a long time to figure out, especially when you do come from that industry, you really have to have the right people behind the scenes, SEO, all of that, marketing. Big deal. The most important. Doesn't matter how good your content is if you don't have good people behind the scenes getting the word out. And anyway, things are going really well for us. This relationship, of course, is working out tremendously with our lads. And, of course, that also helps us to open up doors for working with Scott and Roto Experts and so on. So, but fantasy@primesportsnetwork.com. That is the email address. Send it in every week. I'll check it before we go on the air. And if we have any questions or comments for Scott, I'll send it his way, and we'll have him answer it on the show. Or you can use Twitter @PrimeSN, as in Sports Network. Again, @PrimeSN. So either way will work. So that is going to wrap it up for today's show. Matter of fact, I don't think we have anything else going on today, which is really good because I live in Western North Carolina. And if you've been paying attention to the news, you know that there's a pretty nasty storm out there. So we have to make sure that we prepare in this area, and hopefully we won't have any downtime. So we are way out west in Asheville, and as long as we don't have any downtime, we'll continue our programming and everything else on this end. With downtime, though, there won't be any programming. But you'll know when you see or don't see some of our shows popping up on the ourladsfootball.com website. Actually, the section, and you can scroll down on the homepage. We've got the Our Lads Football Network link. It's right below the fantasy link. And you go in there. We've got a library of shows. We post and update every day, including this one. Make sure to join us tomorrow. We've got Mountain West Football Talk with Robert Gagliardi. That's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And also, we'll talk NFL and college football with Mark Lawrence. That's it. Thanks again for listening to the OFN Today. For Scott Engel, RotoExperts.com. I'm Greg DePalma, and you know the drill. Alpha Mike Foxtrot.